The MAGA movement is currently fracturing in the most shocking way possible, and it's all over an image that even Donald Trump's most loyal foot soldiers are calling pure blasphemy.
No, absolutely not.
We are talking about the president posting an AI-generated image of himself depicted as a Jesus-like savior performing miracles and healing the sick. This isn't just a social media fail. It is a full-scale religious and political crisis that has former allies like Marjorie Taylor Greene denouncing the president and calling the post an Antichrist spirit. It seems the man who claimed he could walk on water finally found the one line he couldn't cross without alienating his own base. The internet exploded when Trump shared the image shortly after launching a vicious attack on Pope Leo XIV, calling the American-born Pope weak for opposing the war in Iran. The backlash was so swift and so severe from evangelical and Catholic leaders that Trump was forced to delete the post, but not before claiming, in a move that would be hilarious if it weren't so delusional, that he was just portraying himself as a doctor for the Red Cross. Let's watch the moment CNN exposes this sacrilegious meltdown and the unlikely new alliance between Marjorie Taylor Greene and progressive Greene-Khanna, and then I'll break down why the MAGA coalition is hitting its breaking point.
And a telling sign of just how far-reaching the criticism of the president has become, my first two sources are talking about the idea of working together. Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene, I have to ask you if you believe that the president thought he was depicting himself as a doctor, not Jesus, in that post.
No, absolutely not. I thought that was blasphemy. As a Christian, I was very offended. And a doctor, President Trump is not a doctor. And that picture had him in a robe, as Jesus is often portrayed, with light coming out of his hands. And he talked about healing people like a Red Cross worker. I think there would be many people that would argue with that, saving lives. So I think it was blasphemy. I was offended. I think he should apologize, not act defensive, and many Christians across America and the world were very offended by that.
And Congressman Khanna, when you look at this, that post came after the Pope had said that he wanted peace in Iran, peace in the world. The president obviously viewed that as criticism and said that he was weak on crime. Do you understand why the president is engaging in this attack on the Pope that he says he won't apologize for?
I find it sad. I mean, I respect Representative Greene as a person of Christian faith. We don't agree on a lot of issues. We don't agree on abortion rights. We may not agree on everything related to gun violence, but she cares about the dignity of human beings. That's why she has spoken out against the president when he says, I want to wipe out Iranian civilization. That's what I'm concerned about more than a social media post. That's why we've spoken out for survivors. These aren't political issues. These are moral issues rooted in our Constitution, rooted in our faith traditions. And my concern with the president is he's not simply arguing ideology anymore. He's made this about a betrayal of fundamental values.
Yeah, that post last week got a lot more attention, where the president said a whole civilization will die tonight. And former Congresswoman Greene, you posted about that after the president had made that threat. He went off on Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, several people who have been pretty big champions of his in the past. And he also went after you. You responded to that post about a whole civilization will die with, in all caps, 25th Amendment and 3 exclamation points. Do you really think that the president should be removed from office?
I think we have to truly question the mental stability of any president that threatens to wipe out an entire civilization of people. That would include all the innocent people in that country that have nothing to do with the war, especially after President Trump said this was about freeing the Iranian people from the Iranian regime. So for him to call to wipe out an entire civilization of people is absolutely wrong. But, here I want to talk tonight about the reason why we're having this discussion. Is Greene-Khanna and I both are willing to say that the current center of right and left that have been coming together for decades have failed Americans. And Roe and I, just like he said, we're completely different. I'm unapologetically pro-life. I'm against the trans agenda on children. I'm against the Green New Deal. I'm for very secure borders and a strong economy and a smaller government. But the current center, right, and left that coalition in America have got us in $40 trillion in debt, have funded foreign war after foreign war after foreign war, and now funding another one, and they will be, and we don't know how long this will go. And it's gotten to a point where Americans can't afford life, Caitlin. And so Roe and I, we exchanged comments on social media saying that we recognize how hard for the left and the right to come together and find issues that we can work together on. But Roe and I did that on the Epstein files, and it was incredibly important. And there's also issues such as funding foreign governments that we share that in common. And we know this is that Americans are going in. So I think this is an important conversation worth having.
Well, and I just want to keep both of you on screen for a second, because I think some people might be watching and have never seen the two of you do an interview together before. I'm not sure if
I don't think we have.
I'm not sure if the two of you have, but that kind of speaks to this moment, and which is why we wanted to have the two of you on together, because I think you're right, Congresswoman, that the two of you have a lot of things that you still don't agree on. But there are these major issues, from the Epstein files to this war in Iran, and no end in sight right now, that the two of you do agree on. And so, Congressman Khanna, I think that is a question of what you think this could potentially look like, even if people are skeptical of it being realistic.
Well, first of all, more than the policies, I think it's the way Representative Greene and I treat each other with respect, not looking at the worst possible thing either of us has said over the last 10 years and trying to sensationalize it, but trying to actually have a dialogue to understand where the other person is coming from, where we disagree, and where we could have more common ground. You know, most Americans want to do that with their families. They want to do that with their neighbors. They're tired of us being as divided and simply looking to score political points. And when you have those kind of conversations, you realize that when it comes to corruption in government and an Epstein class that abused young girls and doesn't have consequences, well, look, the right and the left can agree that we need to have one tier of justice. When it comes not to having these foreign wars that have spent billions of dollars that could be invested in jobs here in the community here, the right and left can agree that we shouldn't be in these foreign wars. We shouldn't be giving a blank check of aid to Israel, which has a $45 billion defense budget, and we should be investing here. Our vice president shouldn't be going and reporting to Netanyahu before he reports to the United States Congress. And the issue of the cost of living. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene has talked about how people don't have health care. Now, I'm for Medicare for all. She may have different ideas on that, but we both recognize that the system is broken. And in my view, unless we start to have these conversations in a civil, thoughtful way, we're not going to actually address the fundamental issue, which is the working class, and many people in the middle class have gotten shafted in America.
Congresswoman, what does that look like for you if, you know, you've talked a lot about what your constituents, your former constituents were feeling, you know, as gas prices were going up, as inflation was going up, they were still paying too much, you know, despite what the campaign promises from this administration were. I wonder what that potentially looks like for you in terms of addressing those still very real concerns from people if you're not in Congress. What would you say to that, to someone who says, well, she's not in Washington anymore? You know, what capacity does she have to directly address that?
I think I have the capacity to drive the conversation and the willingness to do so when there's very few people on the right willing to do that. I completely agree with Roe. Americans are really sick and tired of the divide, and they're sick and tired of the political drama in their lives. What they expect of their elected leaders is to make their lives easier, to make their lives more affordable. And they really would like their government to come to a point where it's seen and not necessarily heard most of the time. And I think this is something that I'm willing to involve myself in because I think the political pressure on the outside is actually becoming more powerful than the ability to get things accomplished on the inside. That's what I found firsthand. Many Americans today are getting to the point where they think both parties have fully failed them, Republicans and Democrats. And they're coming to a point where they're saying, do we need an independent party? Or is there even a candidate that can actually represent my interest? Because many, and it's about really the younger generations, not the older generations. We have real problems coming in the future, and it's the forward-thinking leaders that are going to be the problem solvers for that. Roe mentioned healthcare. It is a real problem, and Republicans refuse to face the issue. You know, they complain all the time about Obamacare, but they're unwilling to do anything to fix it, and I think there needs to be a real solution there. I'm not for Medicare for all, but I am for a strong solution that can help Americans. And I think that involves real work, and it can be hard work, not one that can be solved quickly with our conversation tonight. But it's also younger Americans where, say, parents and people that are married, they're both working and they're still struggling to get by. But we also have to look at Social Security, which is going to be bankrupt in 7 years, and the real problem, which is the devaluation of our dollar, which is affecting all of us, and the growing and never-ending debt that Americans find themselves falling into. So I really think this is something that America is craving, and I'm looking forward to more dialogue.
The sheer level of cognitive dissonance in that White House response is staggering. Trump told reporters, "I make people a lot better," while doubling down on his attacks against the Pope. But the real story here is the political earthquake following this Jesus post. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has been Trump's most aggressive defender, didn't just criticize him. She joined forces with progressive Democrat Greene-Khanna. We are watching a right-left coalition form specifically to stop this war in Iran and demand the release of the final Epstein files. The breakdown of this blasphemy scandal reveals a president who is increasingly isolated. When your own Religious Liberty Commission is calling for an apology and your top surrogates are praying against your Antichrist spirit, the messianic brand is officially toxic. Even the president of Iran weighed in to defend the Pope, calling Trump's post a desecration of Jesus. Trump's defense that he was robed like a doctor was shut down by Cardinal Radcliffe, who noted that he's met many doctors and none of them dressed like first-century deities. What we're watching is the watershed moment for the American religious right. They are being forced to choose between the Pope and the President, between the gospel and the America First war machine. Trump's attempt to use the image of Christ to justify overwhelming violence in Iran has backfired spectacularly, creating a rift in the MAGA base that might never be healed. They aren't just losing the argument, they are losing the moral high ground they've claimed for a decade. If you believe that faith should never be used as a political prop for war, and you want to see if this Greene-Khanna alliance can actually stop the madness in Washington, you need to stay tuned. Subscribe now for the coverage that follows the facts, not the idols. Hit like and share this video because the White House wants you to believe that Jesus' post was just a doctor's uniform. We're going to keep calling out the blasphemy.